St. Augustine history, the oldest European settlement in the United States. Founded in 1565 by Spanish Admiral Pedro Menéndez de Aviles, St. Augustine holds the distinction of being the oldest continuously inhabited European established settlement within the continental United States. This historic city predates the English settlement at Jamestown by 42 years and the Pilgrims' landing at Plymouth Rock by 55 years, underscoring its pivotal role in early American history. Spanish architecture and urban design. Despite the city's deep colonial roots, much of the original infrastructure was lost to time and conflict. The most enduring testament to the early settlement is the Castillo de San Marcos, a stone fortress completed in the late 1600s that withstood the British siege of 1702. It remains a defining symbol of the city's colonial legacy. While few original structures survive from the first Spanish colonial period, 1565 to 1764, St. Augustine retains much of its historic character through the urban street grid initially laid out by Governor Gonzalo Méndez de Canso. The city's narrow alleys, overhanging balconies, and masonry buildings reflect authentic Spanish architectural traditions. Today, 36 original colonial buildings remain, with an additional 40 reconstructed models, many preserved within the city's historic colonial district. St. Augustine is unique in the United States for having a preserved urban core whose design and aesthetic are unmistakably Spanish in origin, making it a living museum of early colonial planning. The discovery and naming of Florida. The broader history of St. Augustine is inseparable from the Spanish exploration of the New World. In 1513, Juan Ponce de Leon, then governor of Puerto Rico, discovered Florida while searching for the mythical island of Bimini. Landing on the eastern coast during the Easter season, Pascua, Florida, he named the land La Florida in its honor. This new Spanish territory extended across vast swathes of what would become North America. St. Augustine was later founded as the primary outpost to solidify Spain's claim to the region, serving both as a military stronghold and a cultural center for over 2 centuries. Legacy and historical significance. St. Augustine is not only a city of antiquity but a cornerstone in the narrative of American origins. Its strategic coastal location, military resilience, and distinct Spanish identity make it a critical landmark in understanding the complex layers of American colonial history. For anyone studying early European influence in North America, St. Augustine's history offers unparalleled insights into the blending of cultures, the struggles for territorial dominance, and the legacy that continues to shape the city's identity today. The struggle to settle Florida. During the first half of the 16th century, Spain's efforts to colonize Florida were marked by repeated failure. Despite launching 6 major expeditions, no permanent settlement took hold. This changed in 1564, when French Huguenots, seeking religious refuge, successfully established a fort near the mouth of the St. Johns River, in what is now Jacksonville. Their presence on territory long claimed by Spain presented a strategic threat, particularly to the Spanish treasure fleets sailing north along Florida's Atlantic coast via the Gulf Stream. At this critical juncture, Don Pedro Menéndez de Aviles, Spain's most accomplished admiral, was commissioned by King Philip II to eliminate the French foothold and secure Spanish dominance in the region. His mission would ultimately reshape the course of St. Augustine's history. Founding of St. Augustine. On September 8, 1565, Menéndez and a fleet of 600 settlers arrived on the Florida coast. He named the settlement St. Augustine, in honor of the saint whose feast day coincided with his first sighting of the land. The founding ceremony was both a religious observance and a political act, symbolizing Spain's claim and spiritual mission in the New World. Menéndez wasted no time in fulfilling his royal orders. Through a combination of military strategy and favorable conditions, he swiftly eliminated the French garrison and established Spanish control over the northeast coast of Florida. The newly founded St. Augustine served dual purposes. It was both a military presidio to defend Spain's claims and a base for Catholic missionary efforts across the southeastern territories of North America. A military outpost under siege. Despite its symbolic and strategic significance, maintaining St. Augustine as a permanent colony proved to be a formidable challenge. the settlement endured extreme hardship, relying on the resilience, bravery, and resolve of its early inhabitants. Their perseverance laid the foundation for the oldest continuously occupied European settlement in the United States. St. Augustine's military history is defined by relentless attacks and defensive adaptations. Throughout the 17th century, the town was repeatedly raided by English pirates and privateers. Tensions intensified after England established colonies in the Carolinas and Georgia, placing St. Augustine in direct conflict with expanding British interests. Recognizing the need for stronger defenses, Spanish authorities began constructing the Castillo de San Marcos in 1672, a massive coquina stone fortress designed to withstand siege warfare. Completed in the final years of the century, the fortress proved its worth in 1702, when British forces launched a prolonged assault from the Carolinas. Though the attackers ultimately burned the town, they failed to capture the fort, and St. Augustine remained under Spanish control. St. Augustine and the First Underground Railroad. Throughout the 18th century, St. Augustine's role in the colonial struggle expanded beyond military defense to include profound humanitarian significance. During a period when slavery was entrenched in the English colonies, Spanish Florida offered a rare path to freedom for enslaved Africans. Escaped slaves who reached St. Augustine were granted asylum and eventual freedom, a policy that sharply contrasted with British practices. The Spanish crown, in an effort to weaken English colonial authority and increase loyalty to Spain, allowed escaped slaves to gain their freedom under two conditions. They had to swear allegiance to the Spanish king and embrace Catholicism. This policy positioned St. Augustine as the southern terminus of the First Underground Railroad, decades before the more widely known northern route was established. In 1738, these principles were institutionalized with the founding of Gracia Real de Santa Teresa de Mos, the first legally sanctioned free black settlement in what would become the United States. Situated just north of St. Augustine, Fort Mose served both as a military buffer against British forces and a symbol of liberty for African-descended people seeking refuge from enslavement. Continued British assaults. Despite these efforts, British hostilities towards St. Augustine persisted. In 1740, General James Oglethorpe, governor of the British colony of Georgia, launched a major assault on the city. His campaign, like earlier ones, failed to overcome the strength of the Castillo de San Marcos, which continued to stand as a formidable barrier to conquest. St. Augustine's ability to withstand repeated attacks further solidified its reputation as a stronghold of Spanish resilience on the North American coast. Treaty of Paris and shifts in power. Ironically, what centuries of military conflict could not achieve was accomplished through diplomacy. Under the terms of the Treaty of Paris, 1763, which concluded the French and Indian War, Florida, including St. Augustine, was ceded to the British. With this treaty, St. Augustine came under British control for the first time, marking a dramatic shift in its political and cultural identity. During the American Revolutionary War, the city served as a loyalist stronghold, remaining aligned with Britain while unrest grew in the northern colonies. But this period of British rule proved short-lived. A second Treaty of Paris, 1783, which ended the Revolutionary War, returned Florida to Spain as a reward for its alliance with the American colonists against Britain. A new era and a changing population. When Spanish rule resumed in 1784, St. Augustine had evolved. In 1777, a wave of settlers, primarily from a failed British plantation experiment in New Smyrna, had migrated north to the city. Known collectively as the Minorcans, this diverse group included people from Minorca, an island in the western Mediterranean, along with Corsicans, Greeks, and Italians. Their arrival introduced a new cultural layer to St. Augustine's already complex identity. The Minorcans' traditions, language, and cuisine helped redefine the city's social and ethnic fabric, contributing to its rich multicultural heritage. The Second Spanish period, 1784 to 1821. Following the return of St. Augustine to Spanish control in 1784, the city entered what historians refer to as the Second Spanish period. However, Spain itself was facing existential challenges during this time. The Napoleonic invasions of the Iberian Peninsula and growing independence movements across Latin America weakened Spain's ability to manage its overseas colonies. As a result, Florida was no longer considered strategically vital to Spanish imperial interests. Meanwhile, the expanding United States viewed the Florida Peninsula as essential for securing its southern border and coastline. American ambition aligned with Spain's waning influence, setting the stage for a peaceful transition of power. The Adams-Onis Treaty, negotiated in 1819 and implemented in 1821, formally transferred East and West Florida, including St. Augustine, to the United States, ending nearly 250 years of intermittent Spanish rule. Florida as a U.S. territory and statehood. From 1821 to 1845, St. Augustine existed as part of the Florida Territory, a transitional period marked by political reorganization and military conflict. Chief among these was the Second Seminole War, 1835 to 1842, a violent and costly campaign waged by the United States against Native American resistance in the region. During this period, the U.S. Army took control of the historic Castillo de San Marcos, renaming it Fort Marion in honor of Revolutionary War hero Francis Marion. The fort once again served as a symbol of occupation and resilience in the face of new geopolitical forces. In 1845, Florida was officially admitted to the Union as the 27th state, solidifying its place in the expanding United States and transitioning St. Augustine into a fully American city. The Civil War and emancipation in St. Augustine. When the Civil War erupted in 1861, Florida joined the Confederacy. However, Union forces quickly occupied St. Augustine, holding the city throughout the duration of the conflict. This occupation made St. Augustine one of the few Southern cities where President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation of 1862 had immediate effect, legally freeing enslaved people in the area. After the war, newly freed African Americans began settling along the west bank of Maria Sanchez Creek, in an area initially known as Africa. The community was later renamed Lincolnville, and it became a vital center of African American life and culture in the post-war South. Today, Lincolnville is one of 4 historic districts in St. Augustine listed on the National Register of Historic Places, underscoring its enduring cultural and historical importance. The rise of St. Augustine as a winter resort. By the 1880s, St. Augustine had begun to reinvent itself. Industrialist Henry Flagler, a co-founder of Standard Oil, visited the city and recognized its potential as a luxury winter destination for America's wealthy elite. Flagler, who owned a major railroad company, extended service to St. Augustine in 1886, linking it with major cities along the East Coast and fueling a tourism boom. In quick succession, Flagler began construction of 2 grand hotels, followed by a third in 1888. These architectural landmarks, designed in lavish styles inspired by Spanish and Mediterranean aesthetics, transformed the appearance of the city and helped establish a new visual identity for Florida's burgeoning resort towns. For a time, St. Augustine became the leading winter tourist destination in the United States, attracting elites from across the country. Though its prominence as a luxury resort would later fade, this golden era left an indelible mark on the city's architecture, economy, and national profile. From Flagler's dream to a modern tourist destination. At the turn of the 20th century, Henry Flagler's vision of transforming St. Augustine into the Newport of the South began to fade. As America's elite turned their attention to newly emerging destinations further south, such as Palm Beach and Miami, Flagler's grand resort dream waned. Yet, St. Augustine did not fall into obscurity. Instead, the city found a new life as a mainstream tourist destination. With the rise of the automobile and a growing middle class, Americans took to the roads in search of accessible vacation spots. St. Augustine's blend of coastal charm and deep historical roots made it an ideal stop. Tourism became the backbone of the local economy, a status it retains today. Preservation and the Restoration Movement. The city marked its 400th anniversary in 1965, a milestone that reignited efforts to preserve and restore its colonial heritage. In partnership with the state of Florida, a long-term program known simply as the Restoration sought to revive the historic urban landscape. Originally initiated in 1935, this initiative resulted in the preservation of 36 authentic colonial buildings and the reconstruction of approximately 40 more based on historical records and archaeological evidence. This transformation revitalized the city's historic core and became a model for urban historic preservation in the United States. The international significance of these efforts was underscored in 2001, when King Juan Carlos and Queen Sofia of Spain visited St. Augustine as part of their state tour, recognizing the city's historic ties to Spain. A role in the civil rights movement. St. Augustine's story in the 20th century is not only about preservation and tourism, it is also about civil rights and social change. In 1964, the city became a focal point in the national civil rights movement when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. led a campaign to highlight racial segregation and injustices in the South. These efforts contributed to the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Today, numerous historical markers commemorate the struggle for equality and the events that took place in St. Augustine during this pivotal moment in American history. Legacy of Flagler's hotels. Though Flagler's initial tourism vision receded, his architectural legacy endured. His first hotel, the Ponce de Leon, was converted into Flagler College in 1971. The institution has grown into a respected liberal arts college with over 1,700 students and remains a prominent feature of downtown St. Augustine. The Alcazar Hotel, Flagler's second, was transformed into the Leitner Museum in 1948 and now also houses the city's municipal offices. The Casa Monica Hotel, which stood vacant for decades and served as a county courthouse in the 1960s, was fully restored and reopened in 1999 as a luxury hotel, once again fulfilling its original purpose. It remains the only one of Flagler's 3 grand hotels still functioning as a hotel today. St. Augustine today, a living historic city. Today, over 2 million visitors annually journey to St. Augustine to explore its rich and layered past. While the Castillo de San Marcos remains the city's most iconic landmark, St. Augustine offers a wide array of historic sites, museums, cultural events, and preserved streetscapes that transport visitors into centuries past. Importantly, the city of St. Augustine maintains architectural control over its historic district to ensure that modern development respects and reflects the city's colonial heritage. This commitment to preservation enables the city to remain both a living community and a national treasure. Continue the journey with us. St. Augustine is more than a relic. It's a testament to the endurance of history in a modern world. From Spanish settlers to civil rights leaders, from pirates to preservationists, the city holds centuries of stories waiting to be explored. Subscribe to History Love to discover more compelling histories, untold stories, and transformative moments that shaped our world. Don't miss the next chapter in America's past. Hit that subscribe button, like the video, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep history alive, together.